I'm Aisha Abbasi with Let's Talk Psychoanalysis from Portland, Oregon, where psychoanalysis and psychoanalytic psychotherapy are alive and well. I have the pleasure today of interviewing Ms. Selma Duckler. Selma was the chair of the American Psychoanalytic Foundation from 2002 to 2010. She was the first non-mental health professional to have such a position in a major committee of the American Psychoanalytic. Selma was married to Dr. Lawrence Duckler, who was a surgeon and who died 12 years ago. Selma will tell us about her life in psychoanalysis and her involvement with the American Psychoanalytic Foundation. Selma was also an actress and has contributed book chapters to some very important books. And I am delighted to be here with Selma today and to have her share with all of us her experiences in life in psychoanalysis and in Oregon. Selma, thank you.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Of course. Tell us how you first became involved with psychoanalysis.
Well, I was a senior in high school, and I wanted to go to college. And all my friends were going to go. We lived in a little town in Wisconsin. The Wisconsin colleges were not too expensive. And I told my parents, and they did not want me to go to college. They're immigrants from Poland, and they said that college was not for a woman. It was for men. A man didn't want to marry a college graduate. He wanted a smart woman, but not in his face. And that I was going to marry and have children, and my college education would be spent in the kitchen sink. And all sorts of excuses. They never said that they didn't have the money. They gave me these excuses. And I had a bunch of girlfriends, and they were all going to college. They didn't have the grades I had. They all came from homes that didn't have much money. So I got very angry. And I felt, well, if I can't go to college, why should I graduate high school? So I stopped going to high school, and I made a tent in the front room out of bedclothes, and I had crackers and jam and my books, and I lived in the tent, and I didn't go to school anymore. And of course it was upsetting to them, but that was how I reacted to what they said.
That was your hideout, your sanctuary,
it was, Yeah, it was my own place. One day, the phone rang, and I was going into the kitchen to get some more jam, and my mother answered the phone, and she looked terrible, and then she hung it up, and I said, "Who called?" And she said, "A man called, and he said, if you don't keep your husband away from my wife, I'm going to put a bullet in his head." And I looked at her. I didn't know what to say. I said, "I'm sorry, Mom." And I went back to the tent. And so the next day, she was, wondering what to do. My father, I don't know what he's doing. They were unhappily married. They fought all the time. But my father thought that he was pretty good looking and women desired him. And so he would impose on a woman, stare at her, flirt with her, and she didn't like him at all. I mean, this happened over and over again. So it wasn't a concern of that, of having an affair. It was he was just out of his mind this way. So anyhow, the next day, my mother said to me, "Daddy and I would like to talk to you." And so I came over into the dining room, and she said, "Well, we've been talking about you're living in a tent, and we decided that you're doing it because you're oversexed." And
I'm sorry, did you say oversexed?
Oversexed. Actually, they never used the word sex to me at all, and I was really surprised, but that's what she said. Then she said, "So we know how to fix it. Daddy, be with Daddy. Go with Daddy, and he will be very, very nice to you, very good to you, and he will do things he knows how to do. He's gentle, he's sweet, and it will make you feel better. You won't be oversexed anymore, and uh, and I just looked at them. I didn't know what to say. I mean, it was so out of the needs of my life what they were talking about, and I was just shaking. So in my hand, I had the jam. And so I took the jam, and as hard as I could, I threw it across the room, and it went right across the dining room and hit the other wall, and it broke. And when it broke, the red jam came all the way down on the wall, and I went back to my tent. My father started screaming and yelling, "She's insane, she's insane. Take her to the insane asylum. I don't want her in the house anymore. She's an insane person. Get her out of here." There was a mental health facility right out of La Crosse, and I was very scared. I guess they went to bed. I fell asleep. And the
But
next,
they were calling you the crazy one.
yes, yes, that was very common of my father, and he was saying, "I don't want her in the house. Just get in the car and take her to the insane asylum," because I threw the jam.
Yes.
And so anyhow, the next day, well, I went back in my tent, and I was really, really depressed. I remember I didn't want to live anymore. I felt I will never get out of here. I will have to be here the rest of my life taking care of my mother. And I just didn't want to live. I wanted to die. So the next day, my mother said, "I'm taking you to Dr. Gorenstein to see what's wrong with you." So we went to the family doctor, who happened to be Jewish, so he knew me, and he knew that I was a very verbal girl. I talked, I laughed, and I was very quiet. I didn't say anything. I just sat there very sullen.
On that day.
Yeah, this is the next day. And my mother didn't mention the phone call at all. She didn't say anything about what she had said about my father and me, nothing. She just said I was living in a tent and I wasn't going to school and what was wrong with me. So he examined my heart and lungs, and he said, "There's nothing wrong with her. She's a healthy girl. What she needs is psychoanalysis." Well, psychoanalysis was a term I never heard of. Nobody that I knew heard of it. And he said, "She has a split personality." And I think he said that because I was so sullen and so quiet, and he knew me as a girl who talked a lot. He said, "There's one in Minneapolis, which is 2 hours away, and there's one in Milwaukee, which is 8 or 9 hours
So he
away."
was talking about psychoanalysts.
Psychoanalyst. He said, "I will make the arrangements, but she needs to see a psychoanalyst." And well, at least he wasn't saying I was crazy and I belonged in an insane asylum. I was so frightened that that's what was going to happen to me. I was surprised he asked me. Nobody asked me anything. And so I said, "I'd like to go to Milwaukee," because it was 8 or 9 hours away, and I thought I could run away there. I could do something. Minneapolis was just so close. So he made an arrangement, and the next weekend, my father, mother, and my sister, we got in the car and we drove to Milwaukee, and I met Dr. Black, who was the first analyst I ever met in my life. And he talked to my father, he talked to my mother. My father was yelling at him, "We gave her everything, we gave her everything. That's why she's so crazy." And that really wasn't true, because when I was 14, he got the certificate to show that you're 16 so you can get a job in Wisconsin. And I was always looking older, so he put in my name and that I was 16 when I was 14, and I got 2 jobs and started to work. And when I got a paycheck, he said, "That belongs to me, Selma, because we take care of you, we house you, we give you food. You don't pay for anything." So I was 14, I gave it to him. And so they didn't really give me everything at all. And then he also said he wanted to talk to Dr. Black because he wanted a divorce. Dr. Black says to him, he said, "You're coming to see about a divorce. You say you give her everything, but that's not really everything." because I guess divorce was a real problem in those days. So then he talked to my mother, and then he called me in alone, and he said, I can help you, but I need to see you twice a week. I need to see you twice a week. It's very, very important you come alone. And there are no needles, there's no hospitalization, there's no drugs, which really made me feel better because I thought there were all those things.
Yeah.
I thought I was going to end up in an insane asylum with a straitjacket. And he said, so there's a train leaving La Crosse to Hiawatha in the morning, and you'll get here, and I'll meet you at the station until you, because it was walking distance, until you feel better. And then he told my parents, and later on he told them it was essential that I go to college. And so I started that in summer session. From then, the next Tuesday, I got on the train and I went to Dr. Black, and that's how I got into psychoanalysis.
Amazing. So it's what a story, what a beginning. So much pain in your home, and then Dr. Black and your connection with him. How often were you going to see him, Selma?
I went every Tuesday and Thursday. This was in the winter of my senior year, and I went till the end of, until I graduated. Well, actually, I did graduate. I went back to school. I mean, I changed a lot. I went to the library and I got The Interpretation of Dreams, which is the only book they had about analysis, and I read it, and I felt, I have hope. I don't have to die. I can live. There's a life I can have. It really, really changed my life as he did too.
It's very powerful and moving to hear you talk about this. You later married Dr. Lawrence Duckler, who was the love of your life and a surgeon, and someone you've called one of the two important feminists in your life, the other one being your first analyst, Dr. Black.
Yes.
I think that's so lovely. Larry died about 12 years ago, but tell us about him. Tell us about Larry and how you met him and the family you raised together.
Well, Larry was at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, which is 2 hours away, and he was in medical school. And he had a very, very old father. The father was in his 60s when Larry was born, and the mother was 30 years younger because her husband died when they came to America. He was killed by the L train. And so he wanted to be a doctor, he said, from the time he was 10 years old. And when he had a break from medical school, a weekend off, then he would hop a freight train and he'd go to La Crosse. In La Crosse, he had a half-sister. That was his only sibling. And he'd spend the weekend there. Because in Milwaukee, they were just his elderly parents. So he did that, and this was Memorial Day weekend. And he was drinking a glass of milk, and the ladies were playing mahjong. And one of the ladies said to Dorothy, his sister, your brother is so cute. Why don't you get him a date? And Dorothy said, I would love to get him a date, but there are no Jewish girls in La Crosse. And another woman said, well, there is one, but she's only in high school and she's wild. And I think she used that term because they all knew I was living in a tent at home. And but wild really interested him. So he said, what's her name? I'll call her. I'll take her out. And so they gave him my number, my phone number. And my mother knew about it. And my mother really, really wanted me to go out with him because he was a Jewish guy. And there weren't Jewish people in La Crosse. So I had decided I wasn't going to go out with him. He was so old, and he had been a war veteran. And I thought, this isn't my world. But as she was by the phone when he called, and she was whispering, go out with him, go out with him. And I thought to myself, I fight with my mother all the time. I don't get along with her. All my friends love their mothers. They want to grow up to be like their mother, but I don't. So what does it matter to me? I just go out with him and that'll be that. And she'll be happy. So I said, all right. And we made a date for Saturday. And he came and took me out to a restaurant for dinner. I'd never been out for a dinner date. And I talked about the interpretation of dreams, and I talked about my analysis. I had been going since winter. And I mean, it was everything in my life that meant so much to me. Of course, he had no idea. I mean, he thought I talked about high school, and he didn't talk very much. He, I couldn't actually understand him. I didn't know the words he was talking about, but he was pleasant, and I liked him. And we called a cab. We came back, and he put his arms around me and kissed me goodnight, which I thought was very unusual for a first date. And he said to me, "I'm going to marry you."
Oh,
And
that was it.
first date.
I'm going to marry you,
Yeah.
huh?
So I ran upstairs, and my little sister says, "What's it like? What's it like? What's it like going out with an older person?" And I said, "I think the older guys have a line that they tell you they're going to marry you, which they're not going to do, but it's a line." And then I didn't say any more, and that was that. And that's how I met him. Well, actually, I went to university in the summer session. And I had to live in a Jewish house where everybody was Jewish, as my parents insisted, and that cost a lot more money than the dormitory. And I got a job, and none of the girls got a job. And I didn't like the girls there, and they didn't like me, and they didn't like it that I had a job. And and I had friends that were Christian friends. I didn't get along. Anyhow, my father's checks bounced. And so they called me into the office and said that they couldn't keep me in school unless I could pay. And so I had to leave school. And I called my uncle in Arizona and said, crying, I said, "I don't know what to do with my life, Uncle Dan." I said, "I don't want to go back to lacrosse. I don't know what to do, and I can't go back to school. I don't have the money." And so my Uncle Dan said, "Well, we'll send you to Los Angeles," because his wife had come from there, "and we'll give you some money to get started. You'll get a job, and you'll build a life for yourself there." So I called Dr. Black, and I told him what had happened. And he said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I'd like to see you." And he said, "Well, that's okay. I'll see you on Tuesday and Thursday, like I always did." And I said, "I don't have any money." And he said, "When you come, I'll help you get a job. And then you'll have some money. And when you can pay me, you'll pay me. And when you can't pay me, don't worry about it." And I couldn't believe it. He was actually saying he would see me for free. And so I said, okay. And I went back to Milwaukee. I lived in a boarding house. And I saw him. And one day in the boarding house, when I was in Arizona, a letter came to me from Larry. Larry found out where I had lived on campus, and he went there and asked for me. And the house mother said, "Come in my office, Larry." She said, "Why do you want this girl? This girl hasn't made any friends with anybody here. She's working someplace. She has a job. Her friends, nobody knows who they are, what they are. She's just a very difficult girl. You're going to be a doctor. You could have any girl in this house you wanted. They'd love to go out with him. Why do you want this girl?" And Larry said, "Give me her address." So she gave me the address, and in Arizona, a letter. My aunt said, "There's a letter for you." Oh, I said, it's from a man I went out with on Memorial Day.
So Larry was following you
Yeah,
around
he was
the country.
following me. Yes, and I said, I said, he's really older. He's a medical student. I said, "There's nothing there." She said, "Can I read the letter?" And I said, "Sure." I wasn't even going to open it. So he said, "I've been looking all over for you, Selma. Where are you? I wanted to get tickets for A Streetcar Named Desire," which was a new play at the time. But I guess you're not here, so we can't go. I'll only feel it. And so she said, I think he likes you a lot. I just waved it off. Then I went back and I lived in a boarding house. And one day the woman who owned the boarding house said, there's a man here to see you. And
This was now in Milwaukee.
in Milwaukee.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know who that could be. And I went downstairs and it was Larry.
Oh, my
And he said, I've been looking all over for you.
Oh.
And he said, I didn't know where you are. And I just stared at him. I thought, why on earth was he doing this? And from that moment on, we started to go together. And he really,
hats off to him.
yeah, he really was determined he was going to marry me.
Mm-hmm.
So I brought him to Dr. Black, and Dr. Black met him, talked to him, and Dr. Black said the same thing. He said he's determined to marry you, and you know, he said he's not much of a Jew, which was very funny because Dr. Black wasn't very religious, and neither was I. And he said, you need love so much, Selma. I won't be able to stop you. You're going to marry him. And I did. I married him right after my 19th birthday. He was 10 years older.
Yeah. So you were 19 and he was 29.
I turned 19, yes.
Oh, my God.
And actually, his sister and her husband, who lived in La Crosse, they were very much against it. Not altogether because of my age. They thought he would marry somebody who was in college, but also because of my father. My father, they called him Crazy Lindenberg, and they just felt he was crazy. And so they said that to Larry, why do you want this girl? She has a crazy father, crazy family. And he said, I'm marrying the girl, not the family.
That's wonderful. It's so poignant, the way he pursued you and zeroed in on you. And both of you must have understood something about each other that brought you together.
He was very bookish and read a lot of books. His parents only spoke Yiddish. And I think he had a fantasy. I was very much a romantic. And I think he had a fantasy of who he was going to marry, and I evidently fit that fantasy for him. And I was lucky that way. I mean, he didn't know what
it was the right fantasy for him to have. Okay, so tell me then, how did both of you come to Oregon?
Well, we married, and he got a surgical residency at Milwaukee General Hospital, and I felt I had to get away from my parents. My mother and father lived in La Crosse, the other side of the state, and my mother called the landlord and said, we're giving notice, we're leaving in 2 weeks. And my father and my sister look at her like, she's crazy. What are you doing? She said, we're going to go to Milwaukee because that's where Selma is. She's not here. And why are we staying here? And my father had to close his business, declare bankruptcy, and they moved to Milwaukee.
Seriously?
And they bothered me. They were all the time. My mother would start complaining about how much she suffered with my father and how terrible her marriage was. And actually, she had brothers, and some of them were very wealthy. And they said, well, take care of the girls, divorce him. But she never would. And then eventually they said, don't come around anymore because you're never going to leave him. But we told you we'll help you with the girls. You'll be all right.
When they moved to Milwaukee, did they bring your sister with you?
Yes, they brought my sister had friends. She was in high school. She was a senior. She was hysterical. They just picked her up and left. And so I had to leave, and Larry thought he would have an office in Milwaukee and live there. That's what he wanted to do. And I thought, somehow I have to get him out of here. So I asked him if I could use his name, and I could write to places and see if they were looking for a surgeon just for 2 years, because he had to be with a board surgeon in order to get his boards. And so he could, and he wasn't going to get it at Milwaukee County. because they kept eliminating the doctors one by one, and the one left was the head of surgery, the
I
resident
see.
that was left.
Yes.
And it's a Catholic hospital, and it's a Catholic school. It's Marquette University.
Yeah.
And Larry's Jewish. I said, you're not going to get it, so let's go away for 2 years. And they answered me, and Larry said, no, I don't want to go here. Maybe if you get Boston. I thought Boston's not going to, they have so many doctors that I'm not going to get that. But a man wrote to us from Portland, Oregon, and he said that they're starting something new. Edgar Kaiser is building ships in Vanport, and he has some factories, and he's bringing people, mostly from the South, but from everywhere, to work, and they needed medical care, and the Oregon doctors would not take them. And
Excuse me, was that because they were black?
yes.
Okay.
And they didn't say that, but
Yeah,
that's
but that's what it
yes,
was.
That's
So
what
the
it was.
Oregon
Yeah.
doctors didn't want to treat these
They
workers
wouldn't take a black person
coming from the South.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And these are all doctors who work for themselves. There was no insurance. So a man named Sidney Garfunkel, who was in Walnut Creek, California, invented the Kaiser insurance plan. There were no insurance plans. People who had the money went to a doctor and paid him. And if they didn't have money, they didn't go to anybody, or they went to the county hospital for charity care. And I thought Larry will love that. He never has to say to a patient, you need surgery, but you can't afford it, which is what he had to say, and he hated it. So he made this insurance plan that the employer and the employee put in so much money, and they had an insurance, they could have everything done. And they had doctors form a group that bargained with Kaiser what they needed, and Kaiser provided the hospital and all that sort of stuff, and the doctors provided doctors. So they wanted a surgeon because they were a small group, and a surgeon could pin a hip, a surgeon could deliver a baby, a surgeon could do a lot of things, plus he could do surgery. So that's what they wanted. And he said he would stop in Milwaukee and see Larry because he was going to Detroit and settle his father's estate. And Larry said, I don't want to go. Where's Portland, Oregon? I said, I don't know where Portland, Oregon is. And he came and he said, you got me into this, Selma. So I'll meet him in the cafeteria if he'll come to the hospital. I'm not going to leave the hospital. And if I'm in the OR, I'm not going to talk to him. But if I'm down there at lunchtime, I'll talk to him. So you come. So it was a blizzard. It was really, really cold. I got to the hospital, and this guy walks in. He's wearing a coat. It's unbuttoned. He wears a scarf around his neck and a hat, but not a hat with earmuffs. He's not bundled up. I look at him like he's crazy, and I think, wherever he comes from, that's where I want to go. And so he liked Larry, and he said he had to go back and talk to the people where he came from, but he thought that they would hire Larry. And Larry was very negative about it. But when I pointed out to him that he was going to get dropped in his residency anyhow, he had to find someplace. So they did want him, and Larry came out in April to get reciprocity with Washington. He had it with Oregon, but not Washington. And he came back and said, Selma, he said, you'll hate it. It's a small town. He said, I went to the department store, and this is the only thing I could buy for you. It was a little teddy bear. And I laughed, and I said, I love the teddy bear. And I said, I'll name it A.B. Larry had been born A.B. Lawrence Duckler. And so he
A.B. what?
Of rum, that's Hebrew for A.B., and Label, that's Hebrew for Lawrence. And that was his name, of rum Label. So he only used the middle name as Larry, and nobody ever used A.B. I didn't even know that was his name when I married him. And so I said, I want to go. I want to go to Oregon. Yeah.
That's how both of you ended up in Portland, Oregon.
And I said, just 2 years, and we'll come back. And when we came out here, I was so happy. I was so relaxed. My mother wasn't at the door every day. Nobody was telling me it was my fault for this and that. I didn't have to hear the fights. And I was so happy. We were here about 10 days or so, and Larry said, we're never going back. And I loved Oregon. I still do. So did he.
That's what Oregon does
that's
to
how we
you,
came
huh?
to Oregon.
Well, that's wonderful. So it was, you were looking up for where to get him placed for his surgical training.
Yeah.
And it happened to be Portland, Oregon.
Yeah, we were very lucky.
That's
It was so far away, they wouldn't come here.
And your family wouldn't come here. Sure, yeah.
And I could live my own life.
That's
And
totally understandable.
we had a little daughter at that time, and everything in me just changed. I mean, we rented a little duplex because he had to go to Vancouver for the hospital, and we lived in Portland. And I said, you know, look, Larry, you can see mountains. There's a fig tree. Have you ever heard of a fig tree? I said, it's paradise. It's the Garden of Eden. I don't ever want to leave here.
That's wonderful. Selma, you know, you've talked about what we would call a really traumatic childhood. And by the way, I do want to say also that most of us who become psychoanalysts have traumatic childhoods. So otherwise, why would we be doing what we're doing?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Dr. Black, and I cannot say enough good things about him, about the flexible approach that he took with a young kid, really, who had been traumatized by her family. He helped you, and then you and I have talked before about how you also then persevered to get into analysis with someone in Portland, right? You then went on to accomplish phenomenal things in your life. I think it would be really helpful for our listeners if you could share, how do you think psychoanalysis helped you?
All right.
What did it do for you?
Yeah. Well, it had a lot to do with becoming involved with the American, with all the analysts. When we came to Oregon, I went to the analyst who was the only analyst in Oregon, and it took me about 7 years to get started with him. And then
because he had a waiting list.
He was very, very busy, and he said we couldn't afford him, and he'd get me a psychiatrist. And I said I didn't want a psychiatrist. I wanted to be analyzed. That was my goal in life. And I said, can I call you? This is when the first couple days we were here. And he said, you can call me. I called him like every week, and it took about 6 or 7 years. And one day he called and said, after the first of the year, Mrs. Duckler, if you're still interested, I have time. And so I went to him, and that was starting the change in my life. Well, it was, and coming to Oregon was too, I have to say that, and being married to Larry. They all helped. But
and maybe one of the ways we can even think about it is that your work with Dr. Black helped you marry Larry, helped you decide to move away.
Yes.
And leave your family.
Absolutely, yeah. And he kept giving me a time to come, but he said nothing about analysis. And after about 3 or 4 months, he said to me, I will take you into analysis. And he told me his fee, and he said, you have to come 5 times a week, and you have to commit yourself to 2 years. And I would have committed myself to anything. I wanted it so much. And so I started with him. And when I got to 24 years, I stopped counting. It was a long time because I had many, many changes, but I also had many changes with Dr. Black. And I think one of the things that happened was I became a person. At home, I wasn't a person. I was the oldest girl in the family, and my life should be spent taking care of my mother. And the analysts always asked me, what do you want? How do you feel? Why did you do this? and everything led to something else, and I got to know myself better, and actually I got to like myself better.
That is
And
key.
it was a new feeling. I was an actor. The 7 years I had to wait before Dr. Berthelsdorf here had time for me. I wasn't just sitting at home. Well, we have 5 children, so I had children, but I was an actress, and I was a successful actress, and I really enjoyed that. I got cast, and then we opened our own company, and we traveled, and it helped me. I mean, people came to see me, and I was somebody I never thought I'd ever be, and I was very, very proud of that. And my husband also, he was also interested in what I wanted, and what I wanted generally was what we were going to do. He was wonderful. So the people in my life, my analyst, Dr. Black, and my husband, they were all supportive and they were respectful. And the most respectful people of all were the American Psychoanalytic. When I came to them, it was unbelievable. They called me. I was telling you that I went to this meeting and asked an analyst who was speaking to come to Oregon. And he said, fine, I'll do that. What do you want me to speak on? And I said, I don't care what you speak on. You're the analyst. I want you to talk to the analysts here in Portland and convince them to join the American. And so I did that, and then I went to the American meetings, and the feelings they had to me, to listen to me, to respond to me, were amazing to me. It was a new thing for me in my life.
Yeah, so in a way, what you're saying is that you discovered your personhood during your treatments.
Yes.
That there are the changes that took place in you with Dr. Black's help allowed you to connect with someone like Larry,
Yeah.
allowed you to decide that you would be better off being at some physical distance from your family. And then when you were seeing your analyst here, that further consolidated your sense of identity and agency, which then you used, in doing many good things, one of which was acting. But ultimately, because of your gratitude, I think, towards psychoanalysis and the usefulness of it, you decided to get involved with the American Psychoanalytic Foundation. The association and the foundation.
Yeah.
Huh?
Well, what happened was I went to this meeting in New York, and I asked him to come out, this man.
What was that meeting?
This was
For all the representatives from different boards around the country.
Yeah. This was their December meeting of the. I'd never heard of it. I didn't know anything about it, and so he came out, and eventually we became part of the American, and I worked very hard on that.
And that was Dr. Margolis. Am I
Yes,
remembering
yes,
correctly?
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
because he was about to become the president, and then of the American, but he came out to Portland to visit.
I went to another meeting, and the director then, her name was Helen, said there's a party to say goodbye to Judy Schachter, who's the outgoing president, and why don't you come to that party? And I said, I don't know anybody there. I didn't bring a party dress, and I'm not going to go. And then the phone rang again, and it was Judy Schachter, the outgoing president, and I didn't even know her. And she said, we want you to come to the party. Everybody wants you. They want to see you. I couldn't believe it. I didn't know her. So we went to the party, and people did talk to me. And then they called me to be on a committee and of the American. And I said, I can't do this because I'm not an analyst. And then this was Margolis and Harvey Rich, and they said, we're not going to take no for an answer. This is historic. You don't know what happened. We have been trying for years and years to get a community person to be on a committee, the American, and they won't allow it. The American won't allow it. And now we found somebody who can do it. And we're not going to take no for an answer. And Harvey said, I will call you every week and I will teach you all about the American. You will know more about it than anybody else knows about it. And so that's how I got started. And I started just on a committee, and everybody was so kind to me. And then we were meeting, and there was a committee called Committee on Foundations.
Exactly, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
That was the Committee
And
on
we met
Foundations.
every March in a different city where there was an analytic board, and we asked the board what problems they had. Was it fundraising? Was it people to get on the board? This isn't as an analyst. This is as running a foundation. And so one night before we came to Cleveland, the woman who was president called me, and she said, I can't do this, Selma. I can't do it. I'm not going to come. And I said, it's tomorrow. She said, I know. You'll just have to explain to them.
So this is the person who was the then president of, was it already the American Psychoanalytic Foundation?
Yeah.
Yes.
No, this is
Still the Committee on Foundations?
That was, they started the American Committee for Foundations, and that was another phone call. They wanted me to be a founder of it. They were starting, it wasn't going to belong to the American Psychoanalysts. It was to be independent and raise money, and with the money, they were going to sponsor programs that would get psychoanalysis out of the office into the street, which is what I wanted to do.
And that was the American Psychoanalytic Foundation.
Yes.
Okay.
And so it was APF. That's how it started. And so I said what I always say. I say, I'm not an analyst. And they say, no, you are. Everybody knows you. We want you. You have to pay. It's $1,000 to become a founder. And we had kids in college. And Larry said, who is it? And I told him, I said, it's $1,000. I'm not going to do it. Larry said, of course you're going to do it. You're absolutely going to do it. It's what you want. So we went to that, and I joined that. And then this is how I became president of it. So then this woman who was president wouldn't come. And the next day at the meeting, I told them that she had decided she didn't want to come and we needed a new chair. So they were thinking of somebody famous. They were thinking of somebody who knew a lot about analysis, who were they going to get, who were they going to contact, even if they had to pay somebody. And then Nadine Levinson said, Selma is secretary. She's next in line. She should be our new chair. And I'm looking at her like she's crazy. And so they voted on it, and they voted unanimously. I was chair. And I left the meeting, and Larry said, who'd they get? And I said, they got me.
They got you. And you were the chair of the APF from
and Larry
2000.
goes, yay!
Yeah, I would say the same. From 2002 to 2010. And I know that on one of the diplomas or certificates I saw in your home, it was
actually, they
written.
also said, when I was chair, they said they would get me a nice analyst to help me. And that was Mark Smaller. And Mark was wonderful. He taught me a lot, and we're very, very close friends today. But a part of my life began to be the American. There's no question of it. My acting career was taking a huge amount of time. And I felt I can't raise 5 kids, take care of what Larry wants, and do the American. I need to leave acting. It was very upsetting to Larry. He loved it. So I went to the Portland Public Schools and asked if I could do anything there. And they hired me as an artist in residence. And so I taught gifted and talented children drama, acting. And I had some students who wanted to be actors. I had them by themselves. They paid for that at that time. And we went to plays together. We discussed the plays and so on. So my acting life went on, but I didn't have to be in a show with 6 weeks of rehearsal, 6 weeks of playing it.
You took it in a different direction.
A different way.
As you got more involved with the American Foundation.
There were many things I was involved with at that time, things that weren't even connected. And everywhere I went, I made friends. I was not only accepted, but people would talk to me about whatever problems they had. And I was a different person. I wasn't anything like the kid I was.
Like
Totally different.
the kid from lacrosse changed
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
bloomed and blossomed.
Yeah, and it would not have happened without Dr. Black and Larry and also the American Psychoanalytic. They were wonderful to me. The second meeting I went to at there, I was in Philadelphia, and we had been driving, and I was wearing pants and a T-shirt. So I went into the bathroom to change clothes, and somebody knocked on the door. Selma, Selma, are you there? And I said, yes. And he said, I want to talk to you about Portland. I want to talk about coming out to Portland and something you're doing there. And he remembered my name. I didn't remember his name. And I thought, oh my God, I couldn't believe it. So I came out and we talked and settled what he had to talk about. And the analysts that I met on Committee on Foundations, they were all very, very honest about their lives. They told me things that were theirs. And it was honest and it was private, and I respected that. And I respected that they gave me a gift, that they trusted me.
Yes.
And the analysts became a part of my life that was the most important part of my life, except for my children and Larry.
Yes. And I think, I'm sure you know this, that they did it because they saw the talent and the potential in you. And I know that one of the things that has been said about you is that you were responsible for bringing psychoanalysis to the community.
Oh, yeah.
And for bringing the community to psychoanalysis. So you were remarkable in accomplishing that.
We were a group here. The analytic group was maybe 3 or 4 analysts and a few people who were social workers. Today, we have more than 100 people going to talks. There are a lot of talks and lectures. And one of the older analysts says to me, doesn't it make you feel proud, Selma? Doesn't it?
Of course.
And it does.
Yes.
It would not have, I mean, it happened because I was very invested, and the American took me on and taught me. And I, in turn, passed it on to the group here, telling everybody, why don't you come to Portland to live? It's a beautiful place. In the beginning, I thought, I wanted analysts here. There weren't any here, very few. And I thought, but who wants to come to Portland? They can't make a living here. There's no people here that they could talk to. And now that's not true. It's a very thriving community
absolutely.
here. Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's totally different.
What a journey. The last question that's been on my mind, Selma, is, as you know, I moved here from Michigan. So I'm one of those people who moved to Portland. And I came here in 2022, about 3 years ago. Before I came to Oregon, I had not been aware of the history of racism and discrimination in Oregon. The city of Portland now is, of course, considered to be very liberal and an accepting place, but we know it hasn't always been so. And I wonder if you would share with us your own knowledge of the history of racism and anti-Semitism in Portland, Oregon, and any personal experiences you might have had yourself.
Well, in the beginning, it was racism that brought us here, because Kaiser had to hire people for the factories, and they were mostly black, and the Oregon doctors would not see them. So they really made the insurance plan so that these people, could get medical attention, could get operations, could get whatever they needed, and became very large and very popular. But it was started because the Oregon doctors would not entertain the idea of taking black patients. So there's racism, and that was, I guess, 1952. Anti-Semitism is a different thing, and that hit us personally. I had twins, and so we went from 2 children to 4 children overnight and lived in a small house. And my husband said, we need a bigger house. And so I looked for a house. Well, actually, I didn't look for a house right away. I only cared about the school district. I didn't care where I lived, but I wanted a good school district so my kids could go to public school. And in my research, I settled on Dunthorpe, which is a very wealthy community and has a great school. It's a Portland public school district, but they pour a lot of money into special teachers and special things.
Nice.
And I wanted that, but we couldn't afford it. So I was still looking for a house, but every day or two I'd go back to Dunthorpe and look. And finally, I found a lot that was in Dunthorpe under that school district. On the other side of the street it wasn't, but this side of the street it was, and we bought that lot. And we started to clear it. And one day the chief of surgery calls Larry in, and he says, I hear you're building in Dunthorpe. And Larry said, yeah, we told you. We told everybody. He said, I told you that. And he said, I didn't believe it. I didn't think you could afford it. And he said, Dunthorpe is a place for landed gentry. And people of your kind don't live in Dunthorpe. And if he meant Jews, that wasn't true, because I did know Jews who lived in Dunthorpe. But anyhow.
So what did he mean?
So he said, you'll have to find, I can't have my son in school with your children. And he said, you'll have to find another place or you don't have a job here. And that's as of now.
I think it's important that we take a moment just to pause and digest that. That is outright, it was outright discrimination.
Oh, there's no question of it,
And so hurtful that he said to Larry, people of your kind are not supposed to live there.
Yeah, that's his language.
And worse, that he was threatening Larry, that if you don't change this and get out of this neighborhood, you're not going to have a job.
I was grocery shopping or something, and I came home, and there was Larry in the middle of the afternoon. I said, what are you doing here? And he told me what had happened. He said, I'm leaving Kaiser. And I said, you're leaving Kaiser? You love Kaiser. And all of our money is tied up in the bank and the mortgage with a lot. I said, what are you talking about? So he told me this situation with a chief. And he said that he would buy our lot and we could use that money for a new lot, but it had to be right now or I didn't have a job, so I'm leaving Kaiser. I said, Larry, this is going to follow us all of our lives. Wherever you go, there's going to be some jerk like this guy who's going to say, if you don't do this, you're not wanted here. And I said, you have to stand up for what you want. You love Kaiser, we love Oregon. Don't move. I don't think we'll just find a lot. So I'm crying. So all the kids are crying. So I said, I can't talk to you here. Let's get a girl and go in the car and talk. So we hired a girl in the neighborhood to watch the kids. We get in the car and we drive all over. And Larry's thinking, well, I said, I don't want to go back to Milwaukee. I don't want to do that. And you'd have to start all over again. You have patience. You love Kaiser. I don't want to leave. And so we came to Council Crest Park. There were people there. He said, you want to get out of the car? I've been crying so much. I said, no, I just want to go home. And so he said, what do you want me to do, Selma? What do you want me to do? I said, I want you to buy a lot. Where? He said. I said, I don't know, wherever. And I guess I went like this. There's a lot. And so he wrote down that number, but I didn't know that. So anyhow, the next day he went to work. And he comes home in the afternoon and he says, it's all set. I talked to the bank, it's all set. I said, what's set? He said, we own the lot. I said, what lot? He said, the lot you pointed out. I said, I didn't point out any lot. I was just talking to you. No, he said, you pointed out a lot. I wrote down the number. They were in Hawaii on a vacation. I called them and I said, I'll buy your lot. And they were so happy. So we got in the car. And I don't know where we were. I didn't pay any attention. I was crying so much. I said, well, Larry, we came to Council Crest Park because you asked me to get out of the car. So, and then we left there, and there's only one entrance to that park and one exit. It's a small park. So let's go back to that park. We took that exit. So we took the exit, which is Fairmount Boulevard. And we drove down Fairmount, and there's the sign. I said, that's the lot. And he said, we own it. And I said, I don't know the school district. There's no bus service here. I don't know where there's a grocery store. I said, but Larry, it's home. It's home. And
And
that's how
that
we
was
come
this
to
home. This is where you built, which
this is
is
it.
the
Yeah.
southwest hills of Portland,
Yeah.
which ended up becoming one of the most
Oh,
lovely parts of Portland, right?
Yeah. Well, in the neighborhood, the people here living in the cul-de-sac, they were all developers. Our neighbor built the Hilton, built the hospitals. They were all contractors, and they said a Jew is moving in. A Jew's moving in, and a communist. He painted his house pink because the house was pink, and yet in time they became our friends.
Isn't that
But
something?
it was here. It was also here.
That
it was
is
everywhere.
another
Yeah.
amazing story of
And
how
it's
you
still,
how you dealt with the blatant anti-Semitism,
yeah.
but you dealt with it with courage, and you and your husband managed to stay put, and you found other solutions,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess we did. We
Yes.
were very happy here.
You are truly, Selma, as I've said to you before, you're a legend in your own time. You're a living legend. And I'm so grateful that I got to be part of the study group that Dr. Constance Jackson had set up,
Yeah.
called the Freud's Bar, and which is now hosted at your home. And when I first came to Oregon, being able to come here once a month for that study group was just it was an anchor in my month.
Well, we were so happy to have you. I bought your book right away, and everybody wanted you, and we're so happy and likes you. It was just wonderful you joined us.
Thank you.
And I love that group too.
Well, it's a very special group, and you're a very special lady. So I want to say thank you, Selma, for meeting with me, for talking to me, for sharing so honestly and vividly the details of your life. And I feel it's a story of inspiration, what you made out of your life, and I really am deeply grateful to you for sharing it with us.
Well, you're very, very kind.
Thank you. Yeah.
And I'm the lucky one. I mean, look who I am today. It never would have happened without analysis.
Never would have happened without analysis. So to all our listeners and viewers out there, thank you for being with us for this very special interview with Selma Duckler. And I feel that part of what I've taken away from this is the value of psychoanalysis adapting itself to the needs of the individual. Selma's story about how Dr. Black, her first analyst, helped her has a lot that we can all learn from. And Selma's persistence in seeking analytic help for herself is remarkable. Following that, Selma's determination to give back to psychoanalysis and to give to the world by taking psychoanalysis out into the community are also admirable traits. Selma's story is a story of triumph over adversity. It's a story of resilience. And Selma is now in her 90s, and I can tell all of you that she is more in touch with the world than many of us are. She reads voraciously. She has such a curious mind, and I feel we can all learn from people like Selma Duckler. So thank you, Selma, and thank you all for joining me on Let's Talk Psychoanalysis. See you next time.